I woke up in that same bed again. It was my fourth day. I went down to the cafeteria, and suddenly everything seemed frozen. People were staring at my face. I started sweating. Did I do something wrong? A blond boy asked me why I was scared. His voice wasn't threatening. It was as if he was expecting something. The other people started smirking. I felt very uncomfortable, but I didn't show it. It was as if I was the abnormal one there. I said hello and left. I still feel sorry for that boy. Everything started 2 months ago. I had just moved to London. My family and I had been forced to come here because of the war in my country. I hadn't gotten used to it at all. I had no friends. My English was bad. I worked odd jobs for a while. That day, I had just finished work when my phone rang. He was the boss. "You've set up all the tables, haven't you?" he asked. I was tired. Without thinking, I said, "Of course." But it was clear from his voice that he didn't believe me. "Can you come back?" he asked. I had no choice but to go back. He was waiting in front of the door. "Hi, Iksan," he said. "Why is everything so dusty?" I had actually mopped. I had even checked twice before leaving. I couldn't say anything. "Hurry up," he said. "An important friend of mine is coming. He doesn't like dust." Then he smiled. "I'm sorry if I tired you out." I thanked him, cursing under my breath with every swear word I knew. About an hour later, I was finished with my shift. I was about to leave when he called out after me. "How about overtime?" I really didn't want to. All my bones ached. "Not tonight," I said. "I'll pay $5 an hour." I hesitated. I needed the money at home. I accepted. I wish I hadn't. I wiped all the tables again and again. I had almost turned the windows into mirrors. All I wanted now was to leave and go home. I hadn't even told my family. I was just about to grab my coat when I stopped. If I could stay one more hour, I thought, an extra $5 wouldn't hurt. I started wiping the tables again with the cloth. The doorbell rang. I froze when I saw the man who entered. He was tall. He had curled his handlebar mustache. With his black fedora, cane, and gray suit, he looked like he had stepped out of the 1950s. He had black hair with white. The middle of her hair was dyed white. As soon as he entered, he looked at me and smiled. "Hello, handsome," he said. "I hope I haven't disturbed you." His English accent was strangely perfect. Then he pulled up a chair. "I was looking forward to meeting you." I didn't know what to say. Trying to hide my surprise, I said, "The boss is upstairs. You must have mistaken me for someone else." The man didn't answer. He slowly sat down in the chair opposite me. For some reason, I felt a chill run down my spine. I reluctantly sat down opposite him. Just then, the boss came in. "Welcome, Patrick," he said in a cheerful voice. "What would you like to drink?" Patrick took off his hat and placed it on the table. "A martini, please." The boss turned to me. "And you, Iksan, alcoholic or non-alcoholic?" At that moment, I really needed a drink. "A beer would be nice," I said. While the boss prepared the drinks, Patrick kept looking at me, his eyes fixed on me, as if he was about to say something very important. I quickly drank the beer and stood up. "I should leave now," I said. The smile on the boss's face disappeared. "No," he said calmly. "I want you to stay here tonight." His tone was polite, but there was a strange pressure in it. "If you stay until the end of the night," he said, "I'll give you 2 days' pay in one night." I really couldn't take it anymore. But when it comes to money, you can't think about certain things. I agreed. The boss brought a few clean security uniforms from the warehouse. Put these on, he said. While I was changing, I asked, why do you need security? He smiled as he adjusted his tie. Special guests are coming. What kind of guests? Elite people, he said. Famous businessmen, important people. Then he touched my shoulder. I trust you the most here. I don't know why he said that, but a bad feeling came over me at that moment. The boss went up to his office. Patrick continued reading the magazine while smoking a cigar. After a while, I noticed the magazine cover, The Thinker's Disaster. I had heard that name before. It was a banned book written by the director of a former psychiatric hospital in London that had been closed years ago. People still talked about the experiments that were conducted there. And believe me, the things inside were the kind you wouldn't want to hear. I waited for hours. The sound of the wall clock finally echoed in my head. Finally, it was past 3 in the night. I lit a cigarette and went outside. There was a strange, unsettling smell in the air, a heavy mixture of wet stone, rust, and mold. As I looked out the street, a voice inside me whispered that something bad was going to happen here. I felt suffocated. I was already beginning to regret accepting the offer. I finished my cigarette and went inside. Patrick was inside, drinking wine to the sound of an old blues record. It was as if he owned the place. Normally, the boss wouldn't even let us near the drinks, but tonight it seemed he left the shop to him. The boss was in the back room, communicating with someone using an old telegraph machine. Metal sounds filled the entire place. After a while, he started ironing his clothes. I watched him silently. Suddenly, he turned to me. I flinched. Then he winked. He continued adjusting his jacket as if nothing had happened. Just then, the doorbell rang, but the sound of the bell had changed. Normally, it was a thin ringtone. The bell, once ringing like a nightingale's song, now chirped like a muffled crow's call. Patrick stood up. Start greeting the guests, waiter, he said, and be extremely polite. He had a condescending smirk on his face as he said, waiter. I was beginning to hate him. Either there was something strange about him, or I was losing my mind. I opened the door. Women in long black dresses entered. They looked like they had stepped out of old Gothic paintings. Some had faces almost ashen. Some had their eyes covered with black veils. None of them looked at me. They passed by me and gathered directly around Patrick. As I served drinks, I tried to listen to their conversation, but it wasn't in English. It was more like a prayer. At that moment, I felt like I had stumbled into a forbidden cult meeting. Then the door to the back room opened. The boss came out. He was wearing an expensive black suit and a dark blue bow tie. He had a fake smile on his face. He opened his arms. Welcome, he said. Then he bowed slightly. Those from across the border. Everyone inside smiled at once. My throat tightened. Perhaps it was just a strange pastime of the rich. Perhaps I was overthinking. The boss had assigned me to keep watch outside. I checked the street through the window every minute. But it wasn't just the outside that was changing. The unease inside me was growing. The guests were whispering amongst themselves. Sometimes they all turned and looked at me at the same time. Then the door knocked again. This time it was men. They were all wearing expensive suits. Their faces were too serious, too expressionless. As soon as I opened the door, they entered. None of them said a word to me. They went straight to Patrick and shook hands one by one. The boss looked at me then. Then he gestured towards the door with his eyes. He wanted me to lock it. A bad feeling came over me. But I went and locked the door. click. I still can't forget that sound, because after that moment, nobody inside started acting normally. Before I could even take a sip from my glass, Patrick called me over. "Arrange the candles over there," he said. "Put the incense in the middle." I did as he said. "Is there anything else?" I asked. He said my work was finished. I was stunned. The boss had simply told me to leave. Had I waited all those hours for nothing? My pride was wounded. I decided to get my money tomorrow and leave this place completely. I went inside to get my belongings. I grabbed my bag. Just as I was about to grab my coat, a brochure that had fallen out of the boss's jacket pocket caught my attention. I looked around. No one was looking. I secretly opened the brochure. It read, "Special Invitation for Mental Illness Day." I froze for a moment. At that moment, I thought the boss was completely insane. I grabbed my coat and headed for the exit. I tried to open the door. It was locked. As I tried to turn the key, I heard the boss's voice behind me. "Sit down here." He spoke without turning around. He had that irritating smirk on his face. I had no patience left, but I didn't want to argue with him in public. Maybe there really were psychopaths inside. "What are you saying, boss?" I said. "I don't understand anything." "You will understand," he said calmly. "Don't worry." Patrick nodded in agreement. Then the boss turned to me. "Turn off the lights." I hesitated for a moment, but I went and turned them off. The place was completely plunged into darkness. All eyes turned to the boss. Suddenly, candles lit up. The boss raised both arms in the air. "Guess!" he shouted. "Have you had your fill of the forbidden fruit?" At that moment, I couldn't control myself anymore. "Open the damn door!" I shouted. "Where's the key?" Nobody even looked at me. The boss continued speaking. "Have you seen the sacred beyond the mind?" he said. "When you lay your head on the pillow, have you heard the whispers?" His voice was getting louder and louder. He seemed to be in a trance. "You son of a bitch!" I yelled. "I'll break the door down!" But he didn't react. He raised his hands and muttered nonsensical words, absurd sounds that a normal person would laugh at. But for some reason, nobody laughed. Suddenly, I started kicking the door. Just then, someone touched my shoulder. I recoiled so hard that I screamed. I started hurling meaningless curses. Then, suddenly, everything changed. It was as if I had been forcibly awakened from a deep sleep. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in an empty chair. The place was silent. The candles were out. There was no one there. I couldn't remember how I got there. And at that moment, for the first time, I was truly afraid. Because I didn't know where I was. The candles had gone out. There was no one there. My hands weren't tied, but I couldn't get up. It was as if my body no longer belonged to me. Suddenly, the candles lit up again. Different faces surrounded me. They leaned their heads towards me, examining me. "No," I said to myself, "this is a dream." But everything felt too real. "What do you want from me?" I finally managed to say. One of them spoke. "We want you from yourself." I couldn't understand what he meant. "Look," I said, trembling, "I have a sick mother. We came from the war. I swear I'm innocent." I started begging, "Please let me go. I won't tell anyone." There wasn't a single expression on their faces. It was as if they weren't human. After a while, they all withdrew at the same time. None of them spoke. I was having a nervous breakdown. I couldn't move my tongue. My arms felt like jelly. Just then, a terrible roar came from inside. Then a scream was heard. Everyone sitting in the chairs stood up at the same time. That's when I understood. They were going to give me to whatever it was. I was helpless. For a moment, I felt myself sinking into the chair. It was as if my body was merging with the fabric. Then the lights came on. My eyes burned. For a while, I couldn't see anything. When I came to, I saw the boss, but he was gone from before. He had cloths and covers in his hands. He was arranging tables and serving guests like an ordinary waiter. Patrick was standing in front of the mirror. He seemed to be preparing for something. He was talking to himself, practicing facial expressions. It was as if he was about to go on stage. At that moment, my muscles began to tense up. My thoughts were fading. I was just watching. It was as if time had stopped. I was now on the same plane as the guests. Had they put something in my drink? Had they given me a sedative? What was that black thing? What were they going to do to me? I tried to think, but my focus kept shifting. I felt this wasn't a coincidence. They were going to do something to me. I swallowed. No one reacted. They were all motionless, like owls. Then Patrick walked out the door. Everyone inside stood up. And then Patrick started crying, looking at me. This frightened me even more, because for the first time, one of them seemed genuinely upset. But it was too late. I couldn't move. Patrick approached me. His eyes were filled with tears. "Have you met the other?" he asked. "Don't be afraid. The shadows know you." "What are you talking about?" I said. "Are you crazy? Let me go." He looked at me with pity. "You're already gone," he said. "All that's here is your body." My throat tightened. "We will set you free too." He was truly crying as he said this. "These tears are for you." I looked at the guests. There were 11 of them. They were all silent. They had wine glasses in their hands. They were watching me. At that moment, I understood that everything was deliberate. The boss, he had specifically chosen me. Someone came out from inside. It was a woman in a long black dress. Her face was covered with a black veil. She had a hammer and a long nail in her hand. My heart stopped. Patrick leaned towards me. He whispered in my ear, "I have the key." Then she pulled a rusty key from her pocket. "Are you ready for the truth?" Suddenly, the woman brought the nail in her hand close to my eye. And at that moment, I understood. They were going to perform a lobotomy on me. All the fear inside me instantly turned into rage. Things I had seen during the war came to mind. Executed people, scattered skulls, brain fragments scattered on the ground. My breathing quickened. Patrick was still looking at me with sad eyes. With all my strength, I threw my head forward. My head hit Patrick's nose. He fell to the ground. The woman screamed. At that moment, everyone jumped on me. They held my arms. They pressed my back against the chair. I was screaming, but my voice was muffled. There was nothing I could do anymore. Patrick stood up. He was sobbing uncontrollably. He seemed to be in a trance. He started thanking me. He kept saying how much he loved me, that pain brings one closer to the truth. I turned to the others. "Why are you hurting me for this madman?" I shouted. "Speak up! Have you swallowed your tongues?" Suddenly, they all opened their mouths. They had no tongues. They had been cut off. My hair stood on end. They were going to do the same to me. Then they all started smiling at the same time. They touched my face, my hands, my neck. Some started licking my skin. The women joined in too. I couldn't do anything. I felt nauseous. I felt like I was losing my mind. Patrick approached me and placed both his hands on my face. "This is it," he said, trembling. "You feel it too." He looked into my eyes. "You understand the absurdity of logic." Then he started shouting, "You will accept it too, but first we will unlock it." Suddenly, he calmed down. The expression on his face changed. He began to speak in a confident voice. "It all started in 1980. All the guests fell silent. I, the boss, and Angela," he said. "We were in the psychiatry department." His breathing quickened. "We looked into the darkest corners of the human mind." His eyes widened. "But the existence of boundaries," he said, "made the boss and me feel helpless." I didn't understand what he was saying. "The mental hospitals in London were famous back then," he continued. "The stench of cruelty spread within the streets." He smiled as he spoke. I was dying to get in there and become an officer. At that moment, a feeling worse than fear welled up inside me, because what they were saying sounded more like longing than a lie. Suddenly, he fell silent. He lifted his head. The color drained from his face. "He's here," he whispered. Then he approached me and said, "Wait, I'll be back." And suddenly, he left the room. I stood there for a while. What he had described was like hypnosis. When I came to my senses, I realized the guests were still clinging to my skin. "Get off me!" I screamed. They didn't leave. "I swear I'll kill myself," I yelled. At that moment, they all retreated at the same time. They scattered like a swarm of flies. They acted like humans, but they weren't. They were just like Patrick's deranged animals. The boss was still standing in the corner, staring at me. He didn't say a word. "Why me?" I shouted. "Why me, damn it?" He was silent for a while. He was thinking. Then he looked at me, and he smiled. "Because," he said, "you're perfect for us." I still couldn't understand what he meant. Water was dripping incessantly from the ceiling. I was used to it by now. Drip, drip, drip. No one was talking, but without realizing it, I had become part of that symphony. Patrick left the room. My damn boss was with him. They were stepping in unison, pausing, looking at each other. Their communication without speaking or thinking made me nauseous. Every minute I saw something new and strange, but I still couldn't get used to it. I was curious about that final hurdle. What they had given me felt like they had ripped my soul from my body. Patrick and the boss sat down on the crowded ground at his command. They formed a circle with their feet. The moment had come. Patrick crouched down beside me. He instantly removed the chain from his neck. He called the boss over. He pulled a rusty utility knife from his pocket. The boss reached out his hand, but his unease was evident on his face. Patrick made a deep cut in his palm. The boss gritted his teeth. Tears streamed from his eyes. The figure with the veil brought a wooden bowl. As blood filled the bowl, the boss's tears flowed like a flood. He even tried to let those drops fall into the bowl. Then Patrick plunged the chain into the bowl and began swinging it right in the middle of my eye. He was muttering things I couldn't understand. At that moment, I lost consciousness. I heard my mother's voice. "Isan, Isan, come here, my son." Suddenly, the war returned. "Get out of here, you infidel. Keep shooting. These are traitors." "Hey, woman, get your son out of here, or I'll smash your face with the butt of my rifle." Gunshots echoed. Screams mingled. Then that sound again. Drip, drip, drip. Suddenly, I came to my senses. Patrick was looking at my face. His eyes were shining with excitement. "What was the other side like, Isan? You were excited, weren't you?" Well, we lost ourselves for this feeling." He started to grin. "You're one of us now." He hugged me. He was crying like a compassionate mother. At that moment, I realized he was wearing a white apron. I didn't know when he changed it. Was I dead? Was I in limbo? I couldn't understand anything. Patrick put his hands on my shoulders and looked into my eyes. "These eyes," he said, "they threw themselves out to hide from the darkness inside. But we're still looking outside." His face trembled. "Do you dare to see beyond the borders?" I involuntarily nodded, as if mesmerized. Patrick turned to the veiled woman. "Hey, Angela, give me the key." I closed my eyes. "May God damn you." Patrick smiled. "All of us." When I woke up, my hands were tied. In front of me were many patients dressed in the same clothes as me. It was all like a dream. I told the doctors everything. They didn't believe me. For 4 days, I questioned what had happened. My mother called me. "Son, how are you? Are they taking good care of you there?" I told her I wasn't well. I begged her. I asked her to get me out of there. My mother started crying. She asked why I went to that abandoned hospital and slept there. I told her about the bar where I worked, but she didn't take me seriously. Although I didn't even take myself seriously anymore. He spoke to me about the 3-lettered ones. He told me the verses I needed to read. His voice trembled before he hung up. "Don't forget God." He was silent for a long time. "If you forget God, He will forget you." The phone hung up. Because of the antipsychotics and IV fluids they gave me, everything felt frozen, like in a dream. I no longer remember most of my old war memories. But today, in the hospital cafeteria, I can't forget those 11 men staring blankly at me, and the blond boy in the hat. Most of what happened that night has faded from my memory. But the only thing that still rings in my ears are the words that doctor whispered to me. "You are safe here." We arrived at the field. The source of the foul smell became clear. There were fresh corpses among the bushes. I had nothing left to lose. I jumped into the field and began scanning the path with my flashlight. My grandfather had told me, when you see that thing, do not show mercy. That thing is no longer human or clean. It is our wickedness. Just then, my foot hit a wire. We've fallen into our own trap, I panicked, only to realize it was a cage. Inside were brown stains and claw marks. At that moment, it occurred to me that it was a cage, and turning to the priest, I said, "You are truly very merciful." They were ashamed of me, as if they shouldn't be ashamed of God. Luze, too, followed the path like a ghost, frozen in silence. The captain's pupils were like black holes in the darkness. When I turned my head, I understood the reason perfectly. That thing, that pervert, was there. It was on all fours. Its skin was as white as the moon. It was eating the people it had torn apart. It knew we were here. Its spine protruded from its back, its waist bent like a centipede's, its body covered in scars. Its pupils were enormous. Its teeth were sharpened with decay, its nails the sharpest and most hideous you could imagine. Its breathing resembled that of a pig. I shouted to my grandfather, "That's it." The priest was praying to God in fear. My grandfather shouting, "I found you, you son of a bitch," fired 3 shots at the creature.
The creature lunged at the priest, beginning to gnaw at his neck. The priest trembled. Despite being hit by bullets, he remained completely unfazed. He screamed. Blood gushed from his shoulder, but it seemed as if he had taken his revenge. My grandfather also attacked. It was on top of my grandfather. With a sudden strike, I shattered its leg with the cleaver in my hand. My grandfather threw it off. I struck its arm with the cleaver, repeatedly and relentlessly. The creature's limbs were torn apart. My grandfather began to kick it, cursing at it. I thought it was over when I raised a knife and was about to hit him on the head. And I looked at my grandfather and said, "Is this what you wanted?" At that moment, the captain jumped on me and started stabbing me in the leg. I remember begging my grandfather for help. My grandfather, momentarily shocked, was also attacked by the monster. While he was struggling with the monster, I was trying to restrain the captain. "Why?" I shouted. He said to me, "You know too much." He had the knife to my throat when at the last moment I heard a scream, "No!" Luze, in a moment of panic and an unexpected reflex, stabbed the captain in the back with the knife I had given him. The captain was dragged to the ground. I lunged at the creature. My grandfather was lying unconscious on the ground. I grabbed his rifle and emptied the barrel on that filth. Finally, he was dead, lying on the ground. I grabbed the captain by the collar. Luze was also trying to stab him in a fit of rage, but I managed to restrain him with difficulty. The captain said to me, "That thing is my only friend. I've been feeding him since he was a child. You bastards killed him, murderers." "Why? Why didn't you oppose this sacrificial ritual then?" I shouted. "Would these people have killed me too, like they killed Luze's father?" When Luze heard this terrible truth behind her father's death, she suddenly collapsed to the ground, and just as I was about to kill her, the captain confessed one last thing, that he had actually killed the madman who died, that he had told the story of killing the creature. I felt pity for her, but I couldn't control my anger, and I stabbed her to death, destroyed her body. I threw her down the cliff along with the pervert. Then I informed the villagers. My grandfather had lost a lot of blood. When they arrived, they took my grandfather away. Luze had also fainted, and I carried her to the square. Everyone gathered around me, and in a worried tone of voice they said, is she dead?" "Yes," I said. Everyone suddenly started shouting, "Hooray for the town!" The elders were wiping their eyes. All the locked doors were opened. My grandmother also came down to the square with a worried expression. I revived Luze with cologne. Luckily, she hadn't heard those last words, or at least she didn't let me notice. I hugged her deeply. She didn't say a word the whole way, but her eyes said so much.
I asked about my grandfather's condition, learned he was fine, and glared at the crowd with hatred. They didn't even notice me. I went home. Luz's mother was also at our house, and my grandmother had gone to ask about her. For the first time, I was able to laugh genuinely. And convincing myself that all this would pass, Luz and I slept cuddled up together. The last thing she said to me was, "We were made for each other. I was a victim of my fate. You sacrificed yourself for me. My hero. I'm 20 years old now, and Luz is undergoing treatment at a psychiatric clinic. We'll be out soon and live together. So what I'm saying is, some monsters we create, some nature creates. But rest assured, ours can't be contained by cages. Those who lock their own evil in cages will eventually escape and surrender to the abyss or to praise.
You think you know what a ruined vacation looks like. A blown-out tire on the interstate. Your hotel room smells like cigarettes. 5 straight days of rain. You think you have a handle on the worst-case scenarios. But sometimes, horror walks up smiling. Sometimes it waits patiently behind glass. And sometimes, you give it your money. It was supposed to be a long weekend in Hilton Head Island with my wife, Brandy. Her sister, Nikki, and her husband, Joe, invited us.
Nikki was 12 weeks pregnant with their first kid, so the trip had quietly turned into something more cautious than our usual getaways. Less bar hopping, more seafood, boutique shopping, and standing on the marina pretending we could afford the yachts. On our first full day, we drove down to Harbor Town. If you've never been, picture exactly what you'd expect from a high-end southern tourist trap. A massive public pier, millions of dollars worth of boats bobbing in the water, a red and white striped lighthouse rising over a half circle of boutique shops and overpriced restaurants. It was beautiful. But it was also 90 degrees with suffocating humidity, and by noon, the novelty of looking at luxury had worn off. I need AC, or I'm gonna die, Brandy complained, fanning her flushed face with a tourist map. And ice cream, Nikki added immediately, one hand pressed over her still flat stomach. The baby is demanding it. Joe threw an arm around her. Well, we can't argue with the baby. We ducked into the nearest souvenir shop, mostly for the air conditioning. Cold air blasted through the open double doors, hard enough to raise goosebumps across my arms. The front half of the store consisted of beach toys, shark-tooth necklaces, and shot glasses with dirty jokes on them. Toward the back, behind a display of hermit crabs and painted shells, sat a brightly lit ice cream counter. While Brandy and Joe went straight for the glass counter to pick out their flavors, Nikki and I got stuck behind a slow-moving family in the narrow aisle. That was when I noticed it. Shoved into a dark corner, between a rack of sunglasses and a spinning postcard stand, there was a fortune teller machine. Not one of the charming vintage Zoltar cabinets you see on boardwalks. Peeling gold letters arched across the glass read, "The Bunny Goddess." This one was life-sized and felt off in a way I couldn't really put into words. The mannequin's skin looked too realistic, but also too smooth, like candle wax stretched over a skull. Thick faux gold jewelry hung around its neck and wrists. A faded velvet turban covered most of its head. The eyes, though, the eyes were enormous, wet-looking, and pointed directly toward the aisle where we stood. I've always hated those things. Too many horror movies as a kid. I started to look away when the machine suddenly came to life. There was a heavy grinding noise.
A crackle of static from a blown-out speaker.
And then a voice. Not the boom and theatrical wizard voice you'd expect. Something breathless. Weirdly conversational. There you are. I flinched hard enough to shake a rack of keychains beside me. But Nikki just stood there. She stopped walking entirely. She turned toward the machine. Slowly, with recognition, she was staring like a child seeing a disabled person for the first time in their life. Creepy, right? I muttered. Let's catch up with the others. She didn't move. I have $1, she said softly. Come on, don't waste your money. It's just gonna tell you you're gonna be rich or whatever. She was already unzipping her purse. She pulled out a crumpled bill, flattened it against the edge of the glass, and fed it into the slot. The machine swallowed it. More mechanical grinding noises. The mannequin's hands jerked toward a crystal ball that lit up with a sickly, pulsing green light. The head snapped down, staring at the cards on its desk.
Then snap back up.
A new chapter begins, the voice whispered through the static. But the toll must be paid. The green light flickered hard. The mannequin's turban fell off its head, revealing long black hair. Pigtails.
Sort of like an Annabelle doll wig, but not as cute.
Something else protruded from the top of its head. Long. Pale.
Bent at strange angles.
They looked almost like rabbit ears. Take your future. Keep it safe, or the bunny goddess will take your place.
Clack.
A thick white card spat from the slot at the bottom of the case. Nikki bent and picked it up. She stood with her back to me for a long moment, just staring at it. The green light blinked off, dropping the alcove back into shadow. Well, I said, lottery winner? Nikki turned around. For a terrible second, her face was completely blank.
Her mouth slightly open.
She looked like she was holding her breath. Then she smiled. Fast. Wide. She folded the card in half and shoved it deep into her pocket. I can't tell you, she said lightly. Come on, what does it say? Seriously, it says I can't tell you. She tapped her pocket. If you share your fortune, it doesn't come true. You're kidding, right? It's a piece of cardboard from a gift shop. Hey, Brandy waved a plastic spoon at us from the ice cream counter. Are you two getting anything? Nikki's whole demeanor lifted instantly. She practically skipped over to Joe and Brandy, the card pressed flat against her hip inside her pocket. I stood there for another moment. The mannequin sat motionless in the dim alcove. Its wet, milky eyes still pointed toward the aisle. Still pointed at me. I shook off the chill, the air conditioning, I told myself, and walked toward the ice cream counter. I didn't realize it then, but that was the moment the trip ended. Its ears looked bigger now.
Hey y'all, didn't know where else to go, so I'm posting this here. My name's Josh. I live in New York, but not the New York you're thinking about. Contrary to popular belief, there's an entire state attached to the city, and I just happen to live in the middle of nowhere. Great place to spawn. Anyway, I found something crazy last night. Well, maybe. I don't know where it came from exactly, but it's in my house now. I just had this crazy nightmare. Can hardly remember it, but I jotted a few points down in my dream journal. Don't ask. I was walking through the woods, but not anywhere I recognized. I grew up in the area, and this being, well, the middle of nowhere, there's not much for a kid to do but play in the woods until it gets dark. So I'm fairly confident I'd know where I was if this were a local forest. Anyhow, I eventually came to a clearing with a big tree, which had a cave-like opening.
The inside of the tree was weird, like it was alive. Yeah, I know trees are alive, but this was different. It was like the inside of an animal, but it was also a tree. There was one part of the wall in front of me that was straight flesh, and there was this weird rectangular protrusion. I don't know what got into me, but I stuck my hands in and pulled it out. It was a book. Well, journal is a better word to describe it, but it was thick like a novel. Its black leather cover containing a mountain of yellow, disfigured pages. On the cover stuck a length of white tape, which written in black ink contained one word: Lockwood.
And then I woke up, like immediately, in my bed, no sign of mud or whatever else I would have tracked in from the woods. I wrote down what I remembered in my dream journal and started to go back to bed, when I noticed something on my desk. Not gonna hype it up. It was that same journal from my dream. I know this is hard to believe, but I swear on my cat's life that's what happened. And if you know me, you know I love my cat and would never endanger his life to tell a lie. I'm 100% serious. On God, no cap, bro. If you can't already tell, I'm in my early 20s and chronically online. So curiosity got the better of me, and I started reading through the possibly haunted journal that just randomly appeared in my house, as all rational people would do. Let me tell you, there's something weird about this thing. It talks about a local place called Camp Lockwood and all the weird stuff that goes on there. Now, as I've stated multiple times, I've lived my entire life here. There's no such thing as Camp Lockwood. I even looked it up to double check. Nothing. Unless someone decided to break into my house and leave behind a writing project that I just so happened to have a nightmare about, I'm going to rule out this being a hoax. That's why I came here. I need to get some other opinions on this because I'm lost. What the hell is this thing? Since I have a job, I don't have time to type out this entire journal at once without losing my sanity. So I'm going to upload individual entries over time. Without further ado, here's entry 1. Entry 1. My name is William. Years ago, as I sit here pondering what to put in this journal, I find myself transfixed by the fire crackling before me. The rushing water, howling of coyotes, and cries of crickets, try as they might, can't seem to win over my attention. Staring into the dancing flames, scorching the flesh of this damned forest. To hell with it all, I think to myself. I've lived my entire life in these here woods, and yet they always seem to surprise me. Maybe I should just let it burn. No, fire won't go far. I don't even know why they want me to do this. So your stories aren't lost to time, he tells me. Not like anyone listens to him now. But boss man gets what he wants. Regardless, I could use a new hobby.
If you don't already know me, just call me Pete. I work in maintenance. If for some reason you don't know where we are, then welcome to Camp Lockwood. We're nestled right in the heart of the Catskill Mountains. When I say we're in the middle of nowhere, I mean it. The closest house, about 30 miles away. The closest gas station, around 40. We don't even have cell service. It's the perfect getaway. Starting out early in the 20th century as an all-boys summer camp, Lockwood has slowly but surely grown into one of upstate New York's premier vacation spots, open 24/7, year-round. It's a mountain paradise, so long as you follow the rules, of course. For the most part, our guests do, and they leave having been restored by the healing touch of nature. However, I can't begin to count the number of stories I've heard over the span of my being here. Hidden in the endless forest surrounding Lockwood lie horrors only God can comprehend. Don't believe me? I don't blame you. I never believed myself until the bodies started showing up. And guess who had to clean up after them? This place just has a nasty habit of killing people in ways you think were impossible.
Now, as I said before, we have a wide assortment of strange rules that you're supposed to read through before you come here. But, as anyone who's worked in retail can attest, customers don't like following the rules. We try to scare people into acting accordingly. Every counselor is trained to recite a boatload of campfire stories to guests of all ages. For the most part, it works on the kids. Summer camp is usually the easiest time of the year in that regard. Our older guests, on the other hand, are stubborn and often find themselves in a heap of trouble. That's why I decided to collect together all of the stories I've heard around camp in my 40-plus years of working here. If the campfire stories don't do the trick, one of these should. For the sake of readability, I will pretty things up a bit and turn them into actual stories instead of just hearsay. Just remember, these are all based on true events. Now, I know there are people reading this who think it's all a load of horse shit. Just keep reading. Humor yourself. This ain't nothing more than an old man telling campfire stories. But if you plan on surviving this job, gather round and listen good. Like all rules, these stories are written with blood.
This first story is one I vividly remember hearing about. Happened not too long ago, actually. I was there for the aftermath. Terrible morning. Anyways, the original story is a campfire favorite. It's tradition to tell it to all our guests on their first night. There's no way you can leave Lockwood without hearing the tale of the Wailing Man. You're serious, right? Yeah, serious. Come on. You telling me you've worked here for 2 years and no one's told you about the Wailing Man? The group of counselors, all seated around a campfire, dig into Ryan. It's a calm night in May, a couple of weeks before the chaos of summer camp. Above shines a sky of 1,000 stars, so clear that the Milky Way is visible with the naked eye. Ears are filled with the melodies of distant frogs. Noses are filled with the smell of charred wood and burnt marshmallows. I mean, seriously, it's like the first story they tell you, Brian continues. I don't know why you making such a big fuss about it, like it's not that big a deal, Edith says. I'm not trying to overreact. I just think it's weird he doesn't know it. Clara steps out from one of the 5 cabins surrounding the crackling fire, a 6-pack in hand. She takes a seat on the picnic table next to Ryan and begins passing out beers. One more for the road, Clara remarks. Well, you've got time to tell me the story now? Gotta finish that beer before you leave? Ryan says. Nah, bruh. I've told that story like 1,000,000 times. You couldn't pay me to say it again. I'm sick to my stomach just thinking about it, Brian says, followed by an over-exaggerated gag. Brian, they literally pay you to tell it, Edith replies. Yeah, but they have the money to. Besides, you're gonna hear it in a couple days anyway, so who cares? Don't make me do it. I'm told you tell it the best, Clara says. Brian lets out a sigh. Shit, when you put it like that, I don't know. What do you think, Rico? Rico looks up from his phone. What? You think I tell it the best? Tell what? The best? Wailing Man. Were you not listening? Nah, dude. It's almost midnight. I'm falling asleep just listening to you guys. Wow, I'm heartbroken. You think I'm boring? You're gonna make me cry, Brian sarcastically remarks. Rico stands up. Yeah, boring, boo-hoo and stuff. I think I'ma head home, Rico says to a response of jeers. You're not gonna stay for the story? Clara asks. Nah, it's way past my bedtime. If I stay any longer, I might pass out on the walk home. Good night, y'all, Rico says, everyone saying good night in return. He walks off, and the counselors refocus on the flame. Well, his loss, Brian says. Ryan, you might want to ride home after this. I think I'll be fine. Ryan takes a sip from his drink. Brian proceeds to crack a shit-eating grin. I don't think you will. Dude, just tell the story, Edith pleads. All right, all right. Brian takes a swig from his drink and leans in towards the fire. A little over 100 years ago, there was a logging camp out in the woods west of here. It was one of the largest camps in the state, at one point having over 60 loggers hard at work every day. One day, this scrawny-looking guy by the name of Elias walks in, looking for work. At first, the foreman told him to get lost. No way a man your size can keep up. It just so happens that the guy was a logging machine, able to cut down a tree twice as fast as the rest. Though the rest of the crew resented Elias, for the first few months, things went smoothly. That was until Elias met Rachel, the wife of John, another crew member. Brian pauses to take another swig. Turns out, Rachel and John were not on good terms. One night, he went out drinking and left her alone in his cabin. How selfish, she thought. She had traveled from another state to spend time with him, and he would just leave her like that? She wanted to hurt him the way he had hurt her for the last 10 years. Elias was one of the few who stayed back, and since he wasn't too fond of John, he had no problem doing what he was about to do. John and his crew ended up returning to the camp sooner than expected, and they found the two sleeping together in John's cabin. When Elias noticed the group, he sprang up and ran out the back door into the woods. Brian takes another pause. A rustling is heard in a distant bush, grabbing everyone's attention. After a few seconds of silence, he continues.
Nah, John wasn't gonna let him get away with it. Oh no. He and his boys chased after him, each armed with an array of knives. After a while of running, Elias tripped over a fallen tree and fell face first into the ground. The group caught up to him and held him down. Fists and boots began raining down on his feeble body, weakened from a day's worth of hard labor. Elias attempted to get away, but John grabbed him by the ankle. Oh no, you're not getting away. John pulled out a knife and began sawing away at the back of the ankle he had grabbed, slicing his Achilles tendon in two. As he screamed in pain, John did the same to the other ankle. His feet went limp, and Elias had no way to escape. John, in a fit of rage, began rambling incoherently before sticking his hand in Elias's mouth and grabbing his jaw. With his hand, he broke his jaw so he could not speak. With his knife, he gouged out his eyes so he could not see. And as the final act of revenge, he proceeded to peel his face off, leaving him a bloodied mess. As Elias wailed in pain, the group walked off, leaving him to the mercy of nature. Ryan shifts uncomfortably in his seat and asks, "You tell this story to children?"
Not like this. Anyways, days went by without anything out of the ordinary. It was assumed that Elias got drunk and wandered off into the woods. A search party was made, but there was no sign of the man. John and his crew went back to the spot where they attacked him and found nothing, assuming a bear got to him first. Later that night, while everyone was fast asleep, the camp was awoken by the sound of a distant wailing. John recognized the sound immediately. It was the same cry that Elias let out. The wailing went on long enough for the entire camp to leave their cabins and investigate. Eventually, the wailing stopped, and a crackling voice enveloped the entire camp. "I can't feel my face." In the distance, a man's screams were heard, a recognizable voice that drew the attention of the crew. Men grabbed their axes and knives and rushed to save whoever was in trouble. The same voice cried out again, "I can't feel my face," followed by multiple painful shrieks. John stood in the middle of camp, dumbfounded by the chaos erupting around him. Screams in all different directions. To his left, one man was knocked to his feet by an unidentified figure and dragged into the woods. To his right, a man walked out into camp, his entire head degloved. John turned around and rushed back into his cabin. Inside, Rachel was huddled in the corner, rocking back and forth, eyes pinched closed, hands over her ears. Suddenly, the back door of the cabin burst open, and John turned to face his impending doom. Elias floated in the doorway, feet dragging on the ground, looking just as he left him. His jaw hung open, blood dripping from where his face used to be. Though his mouth didn't move, a voice shot out from the gaping jaw. "I can't feel my face." The wailing man started floating rapidly toward him, but John slammed the door in his face, holding it closed with his body as it was pounded against with an inhuman force. Eventually, the pounding stopped and everything was silent. No noise inside or outside the cabin. John sighed in relief, but his moment of peace was ended when he felt a hot, humid breath on the back of his neck, and a voice whispered in his ear,
"Give it back." Ryan jumps in his seat as the rest of the counselors begin laughing. Rico walks out from behind Ryan and makes his presence known, allowing Ryan to strike a few retaliatory punches. "Don't do that!" Ryan yells as Brian almost falls out of his seat. "You should have seen the look on your face," Brian attempts to say in between breaths. Edith falls out of her seat in a fit of laughter, while Clara laughs uncomfortably, having also been scared by Rico's addition to the story. Brian composes himself and stands up. "Well, that's enough for one night. Good night, guys." "That's it? You just gonna leave after that?" Ryan asks. Yeah, it's midnight, dude. I gotta work in the morning. I'm a responsible employee. So now I gotta walk all the way across camp after hearing that? What am I supposed to do if I see the Wailing Man?" "Oh, that's right. I didn't get to that part. Well, basically, Rachel was the sole survivor because she didn't move. So if you see or hear him, don't move a muscle. Okay, bye." Brian turns and walks back to his cabin. Rico and Edith say their goodbyes and walk off in separate directions, leaving Clara and Ryan. "You want me to walk you back?" Clara jokingly asks. Ryan, still visibly shaken, puts on an over-exaggerated display of bravery. "Nah, I'll be fine. That didn't scare me a bit." "I saw you jump a foot off the bench." Clara laughs. "I was just getting ready to defend you, obviously." "Whatever. I'll see you tomorrow." Clara begins heading off to her cabin. The silence has become deafening, but Ryan silently reassures himself that it's just a story. If the Wailing Man was real, he'd have seen him by now. Ryan leaves the fire and walks into the woods, taking a shortcut to his cabin. Every sound that used to disappear in the background is amplified. Each snap of a branch, each gust of wind ticks his heartbeat up more and more. At one point, Ryan hears the shuffling of grass ahead of him and freezes. His heartbeat resumes after a chipmunk scurries across the path, getting cursed at by Ryan. He continues down the path. An owl hoots in a tree above him, and soon after flaps its wings, flying off to catch its next meal. Ryan stops in his tracks again. Did he just hear something? He quickly jerks his head back. Nothing. He's walking faster now, seemingly trying to outpace his paranoia. There's no way they'll try to scare him again. People aren't supposed to be out this time of night anyway. His inner monologue is interrupted by what sounds like something dragging. Ryan is frozen in the middle of the road now, his cabin visible in the distance. He feels the urge to run, especially when he hears a wailing coming from the path, getting closer and closer. "Brian, I swear to God, don't fucking do this to me!" Ryan yells out, hearing an unidentified voice in response. "I can't feel my face. The wailing and dragging of feet reach the end of the path. Ryan's heart stops when a tall, dark figure emerges from the woods, floating in the air. Its feet dangle and scrape the ground as it hovers towards him, mouth agape, chasms where eyes should be. Its body is covered by black, tattered clothing. Its arms hang limp to its sides. Fresh blood drips from where its face used to be.
I can't feel my face.
Ryan stares in horror as the figure continues to slowly float in his direction. He's not supposed to move, but what if it bumps into him? Does it see him? His cabin's not too far from here. He can make a break for it and... No. He needs to follow the rules. Don't move, as Brian said. The figure draws nearer and nearer. He starts to pray in his head for forgiveness, for protection, for anything but to be where he is now. The wailing man stops, just feet away from him, still staring. Everything goes numb. It's as if time itself stopped.
Give it back.
To hell with the rules. Ryan sprints toward his cabin, dragging feet keeping pace close behind. The same wailing as before roars thunderously behind him, but this time it's reversed. His heart pounds faster than he's ever felt before. His legs go numb as if they aren't there, but he keeps speeding forward. He's never run this fast before, and yet the wailing man continues to gain on him. The reversed wailing just inches behind his head now. He shoots up the stairs to his cabin, reaches for the door, swings it open, and slams it shut, locking it and pressing his body against it as the animalistic pounding threatens to tear it down. As the pounding continues on the door, Ryan hears something at the window to his right. He doesn't see anything through the window, but it nonetheless slides up a bit, as if someone tried to open it from the outside. The invisible figure begins moving from window to window on both sides of the cabin, almost instantly, as if there were two people, from the front of the cabin toward the back. As the attempts reach the back of the cabin, he remembers something that drains the blood from his face. The back door doesn't lock. Seeing no other choice but to hide, Ryan launches from the door over to his bed, crawling under just in time for the pounding on the front door to stop and for the back door to swing open. The cabin is completely silent now, all except for the dragging of feet on the wooden floor. Ryan covers his mouth and watches as the dangling feet drag around the bed, into the bathroom, out of the bathroom, and into the counselor's room, out of the counselor's room, and back into the main room. The feet stop right in front of the bed, facing the front door. He holds his breath, staring at the dangling feet for what feels like hours, until he hears a coarse voice under the bed, right behind him.
Give it back. ...
Now, as I said earlier, I was there for the aftermath. My cabin's not too far from where his was. I was woken up by the sound of screaming. Got out of bed to find Clara at the door of his cabin, bawling her eyes out. I knew exactly what happened when I saw his body. His body laid at the foot of the door, a blood trail leading back under the bed. I found his face in a shrub behind the cabin. The wailing man is an especially insidious demon. The way to survive goes against our very instincts. But when telling his story, you need to emphasize this point. If you see or hear the wailing man, remember this. Do not move. She shifts forms to adapt to the wilderness. A snake, a wolf, a raven, a goat, a doe. She watches in the shadows, waiting, plotting. I hear her sing every night, a sweet, beautiful music. She sings like a warm silk, with a richness compared to the finest delicacies known to man. But it's the song of a siren, intimate and personal. No matter how beautiful it sounds, she never compares to the sound, for she is deformed. One blind eye, a hunchback, and gnarled white skin translucent enough to see the blood pump through her veins. It's sickly as her veins pulse. That which comes from the devil is only an imitation, a farce to distract mankind from their truest desires. The witch roams the woods in service of her masters. It's because of her betrayal to them that she lives in the woods. This is the realm that is cursed to hold her, every inch ensorcelled. And here she waits, singing her song. The woods around her are decayed and gray. No sun penetrates the foliage. The white ash of the bark blends into the environment. A sepia-toned landscape is bleak as Golgotha. But here, the earth doesn't cry or quake. It doesn't have the will. Even though blood seeps into the dirt, everything is sickly. The earth oozes unnatural filth that corrodes all it touches. It's an unholy swamp, an amalgamation of sickly matter. Everything is unattended. Overgrown vines, moss, mushrooms, and fungus abounds in the swamp. It breathes and eats, though it starves because it cannot see the sun. The vegetation is black and dead, overgrowing the trees, hoping to see the sun, but to no avail. The skull is placed on a hill, then crushed on the rock. A raven circles the sky, landing on a rotted log. It pecks away at the wood until its beak chips the rot. It sticks its beak in and eats the maggots within, crushing the larvae with its beak and swallowing the carcasses. It looks stoically into the gray. The pupil dilates as it catches the white sun, the heat absorbing into the black feathers. The raven flies into the sky, searching the woods, and comes upon a tree, perching on a branch and observing at those that pass by. Abel sits with his father around a fire, cooking the trout they caught in the nearby river. It cooks in the flame, charring. They take it out of the flame and eat it, the soft pink flesh nourishing them, the charred skin adding a robustness. A deer sips out of the creek, its brown coat covered in white patches. The doe is visited by the buck. They're both majestic, 5 points. It wanders down the river and drinks. The brown hair contrasts with the lush green of the forest, the dark hue of the pines. The forest is filled with the sounds of the cardinal, sparrow, and barred owl, each song distinct and a short, sweet sound. A bullfrog croaks among the moss-covered stones. The trickle of the river is soothing. Abel walks along the river and comes to a clearing. He looks in the river and finds strange stones in the bed. He picks one up. It's squishy, and the texture is wrong. It's a grayish white. He rolls it in his hand, looking closely. His hand to see a gray spot in a black ring. It's not a rock, but an eye. Abel drops it, terrified. He looks in the river and sees there's hundreds of them, all of them a gray pupil that's dead. Hundreds of dead fish floating on top of the river. He hears his name whispered in the wind, a soft feminine voice. Abel runs back to his father, terrified. But his father says nothing. He just pats his chestnut hair as a comfort. He wraps his arms around his waist and puts his face in his father's chest, trying to hide from those dead eyes, trying to hide from their stare, hide from the whisper. Abel peeks through his father's arm and looks to the south. The raven flies into the tree line.
Howdy, stranger. Come, have a seat. The forest is cold tonight, which means our campfire needs to burn that much hotter.
That lass over there is just about ready to tell her tale. It's not often that we have such a young storyteller, but the metaphorical pulpit is open to any and all who would stand upon it. I admit that I dislike the notion that somebody so young could be in possession of a story that fits the mold of those told around this fire, but that does not mean that such a story should not be shared. If anything, the following tale will likely remind us that age is not a barrier against tragedy. Dark times can come for all of us, and sometimes the best way to overcome such times is by sharing them with anybody who is willing to listen.
Asterisk. Hoof prints. Things were hard after P.A. died. We didn't have long to mourn him. The farm didn't wait for us to get over our sadness before it presented us with work to do. He was barely in the ground an hour before we were back to our regular chores. The only difference was that we had to mind our tears while we worked, lest we wanted our eyes to grow too blurry for us to see. In a way, I was grateful to be working again so soon after his burial. It gave me something to focus on. I know Ma and my brother appreciated it too. There isn't anything like a busy schedule to mend a broken heart, Ma had always said, and our schedule was nothing if not busy. We didn't know how we were going to get by after his death. Tending to the farm was difficult even when he was around, and without him, the work ahead seemed almost impossible to tackle. We had never been able to take on any additional hands, even when he was alive, so my ma, my brother, and I were all the help we had. It wasn't always this way. I used to have two older brothers who would always help Pa with the more formidable work, the kind that required a strong back that was eager to be broken. The three of them together were able to handle things pretty well on their own, while Ma and I tended to the home, and the youngest focused on growing up so he could join our brothers out on the farm one day. As it would turn out, he would never get the chance. Both of our older brothers died in the same winter, one to fever and the other to a patch of ice that clearly wasn't as sturdy as it looked. Ma had always warned him against crossing that river when it was frozen over, but he always said it made a good shortcut. So we suddenly went from 6 to 4. As the newly oldest child, I had no choice but to leave the home and help Pa out on the farm. Turns out I took to the work about as well as I could have, but I was still one girl who wasn't even fully grown, and I simply couldn't compare to two boys who were double my size and multiple times my strength. Pa never held it against me though, and somehow we managed to get by.
But then suddenly, we went from 4 to 3. Suddenly, my little brother was the only man left, the one to survive with 3 others that died. But he was only 11 when we put Pa in the ground, and I was hardly 2 years his senior. Ma was suddenly the only adult we had left, and even then, she hadn't done much in the way of farm work since giving birth to my oldest brother nearly 2 decades earlier. Things were looking grim, to say the least, and they felt just about as bad as they looked. We managed to keep the farm alive for the next few months, but the work was grueling, and we could tell right away that we wouldn't be able to keep it up forever. Winter was drawing near, and we knew that it would wind up deciding our future. Come spring, our farm would either still exist or it wouldn't. There were no other ways about it. In the early spring, I had helped Pa deliver a lamb from one of the pregnant ewes. I named him Jasper, and he and I became fast friends. I had raised Jasper since birth, and had found a lot of comfort in him when Pa died. I was worried that Jasper would end up killed by the elements if the winter grew harsh enough, or worse, we would end up having to kill and eat him ourselves. I told Ma about my fear, and she immediately told me to bury it. She could see how close Jasper and I were, and she promised me that he would always be safe. And I had believed her. Winter hit us hard that year. The first snowfall came early, and it brought with it a terrible chill that we were never quite able to shake. We hadn't managed to harvest nearly enough food to sustain every animal, and soon it became clear that several of them were going to need to be slaughtered, if not to provide us with our own nourishment, then at least to remove a few mouths to feed. I worried for Jasper, since I knew that at his age, he didn't yet offer nearly as much value as some of the older animals on the farm did, which made him proper for the chopping block. But I forced myself to have faith in Ma's word. She told me that Jasper would be safe, which meant he would be safe. I didn't have anything to worry about. I woke early one morning and set about my daily chore of feeding all of the animals their meager breakfast. By the end of winter, they would all be lucky to still be skin and bones. But Ma said if we were to ration their food just right, then most of them would survive. It had just snowed the night before, and the entire farm was covered in a fresh curtain of white. I enjoyed being the first living soul to leave my footprints in the snow. Looking back on it, I think I was trying real hard to bring some sort of positivity to that cruel, mean winter. I opened the gate to our barnyard and crossed the field of snow leading to the building. Once inside, I set about feeding all of our animals, making sure to portion off the feed carefully as I went along. Ma would have been sour if I had told her this, but I was always certain to save just a little bit extra for Jasper. He was concerningly small for his age, and I worried about his chances of surviving the winter if he didn't fatten up a little soon. I got through every animal in the barn before feeding Jasper. This wasn't uncommon. He had always been a timid boy, and he usually waited until the rush of the other animals eating had calmed down before enjoying a meal himself. When he didn't come out of one of his usual hiding spots, I began to look all around for him. Worry began to set in when I realized that I couldn't find him anywhere. I called his name a number of times, but he refused to come running like he usually did. When I was sure that he wasn't in the barn, I went back outside, hoping to find him in the barnyard, with no luck. My first thought was that Jasper had somehow gotten beyond the fence, and I feared where he could have been and what sort of trouble he could have been in were this the case. I took a few steps toward the barnyard gate, but I immediately stopped when I spotted something that halted me in my tracks. I saw hoof prints in the snow. They started on the inside of the fence, near the entrance to the barn. I was surprised that I hadn't noticed them when walking toward the building earlier, but I suppose I hadn't thought much of seeing animal tracks near a barn until I realized that one was missing. What was more confusing to me was both how they started on the outside of what had been a closed door and how they also had somehow managed to pass directly over the fence and continue onward until they were well out of sight. I didn't and still don't know much about tracking animals, but I could tell that the hooves which had produced the prints were cloven, which meant they could have been left by a sheep. I quickly made my way to the gate and walked around the fence until I got to the place where the tracks picked up again. Upon reaching them, I was concerned to find little spots of blood staining the fence and the snow. I didn't know how Jasper could possibly have climbed over that fence, but it looked as though he had injured himself in the effort. I felt even more determined to find the lost lamb, and so I quickly set off in the direction of the hoof prints. The prints led me all the way beyond the tree line to the very limits of our farm. All along the way, I found more flecks of blood in the snow, which only served to worry me more and more. I reached the river that served as the border of our farm, the same river in which my older brother drowned. The prints went right up to the edge of the river and even passed over a sheet of ice clinging to the riverbed before they seemingly disappeared into the water. The river wasn't nearly as frozen as it had been on the day my brother had fallen in, but large chunks of ice clung to the surface of the water and created enough of a bridge that I could have jumped from patch to patch in order to get across if I tried. I even thought about doing just that, but my mind flashed back to the day they had pulled my brother out of the water, and the memory of his blue skin and frozen hair kept my feet planted firmly on the bank. After considering my options for a few moments, I quickly realized that I had no other choice but to turn around and return to the farm. I found Ma and my younger brother in the farmhouse. My brother was sitting at the kitchen table, and Ma was sipping her coffee while she prepared some scrambled eggs on the stove. She smiled at me as I entered the kitchen. "Morning," she said. "Breakfast will be ready in just a minute." "I can't find Jasper," I said. "He wasn't in the barn when I went to go feed the animals." My mother frowned. "Strange," she said. "Did you leave the gate open last night?" "Nah," I said, "but I think I found his hoof prints leading away from the barn. He climbed over the fence and everything, and I don't know how he got out in the first place since the barn door was closed when I got there too." Ma suddenly stopped stirring the eggs. She turned and gave me her full attention, her face now deadly serious. "You didn't follow those tracks, did you?" "I did," I admitted hesitantly, suddenly feeling as though I had done something wrong. I saw blood, and I thought he might have been hurt. The tracks led all the way to the river and even seemed to go into the water. I know better than to try and cross on that ice. So I turned back. Ma immediately moved the pan of eggs off of the stove. She looked at my brother and said his name in order to get his attention. "Go and get started on your chores," she told him. "But Ma," he complained, "I ain't had nothing to eat yet." "You can come back and eat in a little while," she said. "Now go." My brother looked as though he wanted to protest further, but the sharpness in our mother's voice made him think better of it. Instead, he quickly stood up and walked out of the room. When we were alone, Ma turned and looked at me again. "You won't follow those tracks or any like them ever again," she said. "Am I understood?" "But Jasper is missing, Ma," I said. "I think he's hurt." "Jasper is already dead," she said suddenly. "And anyway, those tracks ain't even his." Her words stunned me. I felt my stomach fall through the floor. It took me several seconds to respond. "How can you know that?" I asked, without knowing which of her 2 points I was addressing. "I haven't seen those hoof prints," she said, "but I'm willing to bet they're way too big to be Jasper's." Her words confused me. I realized I had been too preoccupied with going after Jasper to even consider the sizes of the prints I was following. My mother went on, "And I bet if I go look at them, I'll find that the thing that left them stands on 2 legs instead of 4. 2 legs? At this point, I thought she was pulling one of my own. I hadn't even considered this as a possibility. What kind of creature with hooves like those could walk on 2 legs? "Not any creature that you want to come across," Ma said. She sighed and picked up her cup of coffee. When she spoke next, her voice sounded softer, more motherly. "Look, why don't we take a seat and have a talk? There's something we ought to discuss." She made her way to the kitchen table, and I joined her there. When we were both sitting down, she took a sip of her coffee and began to speak again. "There's something your PA and I never told you about," she said. "It's something we never thought we had to tell you about." She paused as if she expected me to speak. When I said nothing, she took another sip of coffee and went on. "Our family, we aren't the only ones to ever own this land." I frowned. "I thought Grandpa was the one to settle this farm," I said. "He was," she said. "He settled it years before your PA was born. The woodland surrounding us used to cover our land until he came and carved out a home for his family. But something something was here before him, and that something was upset that your grandpa was here.
What was it? A bear? I asked. A coyote?
No, she said. Something worse. Something older. Something that still exists out there to this very day. I remained silent as she took another sip of her coffee. It was during that first winter that the creature made its presence known. It began attacking the farm almost every night and slaughtered many of your grandpa's animals. Your grandpa tried to fend it off at first, but things came to a head after the creature took his daughter, your pa's older sister. Your grandpa, desperate for these attacks to stop, did something he never could have imagined he would do. He gave in to the creature. One night he left a goat out for the creature to take, as a way to appease it. It worked. The creature stopped with its near nightly raids, and instead returned only a couple of times per week, and only ever during the winter, in order to claim its occasional sacrifice. Farm animals continued to disappear, but your grandpa never lost another child.
This continued on until your grandparents both died and your pa inherited the farm. Your pa saw what the creature had done to your grandpa, and he didn't want us to live that way. He played the creature's game for a while, but eventually he decided that enough was enough. He began to spend night after night in the barn, waiting for the creature to arrive, his hunting rifle in his lap. I tried to stop him. I was convinced that he was going to get us all killed. But then he did something that I never would have expected. He actually drove the creature off. It arrived late one cold winter night, only to find your PA there to greet it. And while he wasn't able to kill it, he managed to shoot it enough times that the thing fled as blood ran from its many wounds. We never saw the thing again that winter, nor the winter after, and we assumed its reign of terror was over. You were born a couple of years after that, and by then we had mostly forgotten about the creature that had tormented our farm.
I sat considering my ma's words for a while before speaking. And you think this creature is the same one that left those hoof prints in the snow?
She nodded. I do. It must have arrived during the night and had its tracks covered by the snowstorm, then left when the storm was over. That's why you thought it was Jasper's hoof prints you saw. But why would it come back after all this time?
This is the first winter we've had since your father passed, Ma said. The thing must realize that he is gone. It's clearly been biding its time, waiting for its chance to reclaim its hold over this farm.
Well then, let's drive it off again, I said. Pa managed to do it once, so there ain't no reason we can't do it a second time. No, she said quickly. Your PA was foolish to oppose that creature. He just as likely could have gotten one of your brothers killed, like now your grandpa did to your aunt. If you anger that creature, you could end up causing the same thing to happen. But we can't live like this, I pleaded. That thing killed Jasper. And it will kill as many animals as it wants, she said. From now on, if you see more hoof prints, you'll be sure to ignore them. Am I understood? I considered arguing back, but I suddenly felt overwhelmed by my grief over losing Jasper, and I felt the defiance in me quickly deflate. Yes, Ma, I said sheepishly. Understood. That was the end of the discussion, but it was not the end of the matter. Several weeks and several snowfalls passed, during which I saw the cloven-hooved creature's tracks a number of times. The thing walked straight up to the barn and then straight back out, and each time the creature left with another animal. Pigs, chickens, sheep, goats, all of them were subject to its hunger. The only thing it didn't seem to take were adult horses and cows, which must have been too big for it to carry off.
Each time I saw those tracks and I discovered that another animal was missing, I was reminded of my grief over Jasper, which always tore fresh and new wounds into my heart. But then, one day, something changed. One day that grief turned to anger, and that anger turned to rage. I thought of what that horrible creature had done to my poor little lamb, and what it had done to so many critters like it. And suddenly, I decided that enough was enough. I awoke early one morning and went to the old shed where Pa's hunting rifle had been resting since he had died. I took the rifle to the barn and stashed it behind a bale of straw, where it would wait all day until I returned to the barn each night. I sat on that bale night after night, the rifle in my lap, waiting for the thing to finally arrive. Needless to say, I was terrified out of my mind. Pa had taught me how to shoot the rifle a few times, but that had been a long time ago, and I hadn't actually fired it myself more than once or twice. I doubted if I would actually be able to use the thing correctly on the night that the creature finally returned. But my resolve was bolstered by my anger over Jasper's death, and so I fought through my fear and the winter cold and managed to stay there until the end of each long, dark, frigid night. Until at long last, the creature returned. I had dozed off in my spot atop the straw and awoke groggy and dazed to the sound of nervous animals in their stalls. At first I was confused by the sudden commotion, but as my brain came back to me, I understood what was happening. The thing had finally arrived. I don't remember breathing for the rest of the night. I quickly scurried behind the bale and I laid my rifle across the straw so that its barrel was turned in the direction of the closed barn doors. My world was a swirl of darkness and distressed animal bleating. My body was shaken with equal parts cold and fear. Despite the harsh winter weather, I felt myself beginning to sweat. I watched as one of the barn doors slowly creaked open, just far enough to admit whoever or whatever had moved it. Icy moonlight streamed in through the new threshold, chasing away some of the shadows. The light only lived unimpeded for a brief moment before the figure stepped through the opening, revealing its terrible form. It existed as little more than a silhouette cast by the generosity of the moon, but the darkness could not hide the distinct sound of hooves walking across the cold dirt ground. I only managed to fire a single time. The barn filled with the booming sound of the gunshot, followed by a wave of screaming animals as the impact of the rifle knocked me away from the bale and onto the ground. My head rang with the blast, and my body ached from the blow. I was in so much pain that I thought I had broken my shoulder, but it turned out to be all right. I sat up as quickly as I was able and looked toward the entrance. The barn door still hung partially open, but the creature was gone. Snatching up the rifle, I forced myself to my feet and rushed to where the creature once stood. A quick investigation found a small splash of dark blood on the ground near the new set of snowy hoof prints in the dirt. But looking at the fresh hole in the closed barn door told me that I must have only grazed my target. I ran out into the cold where I found a trail of hoof prints and blood that led all the way to the fence. I turned and ran for the gate leading to the world beyond the barnyard, which is where I found my mother standing tightly wrapped in a blanket, a lit lantern in her trembling hand. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" she asked. "I shot it, Ma," I said frantically. "I shot it and it ran off. If I go after it, I might be able to kill it." "You'll do no such thing," Ma said. "Now come inside before you freeze to death." "But Ma..." "No," she said. "You deliberately disobeyed my order, and now you've gone and angered that thing. If you haven't hurt it badly enough to scare it off for a while, then we'll be lucky if it doesn't come back and kill us all this very night. Now get inside, immediately." I frowned.
once again feeling as though I had done something very wrong. My pride at having shot the creature quickly drained, as did my urge to argue with my mother. Instead, I did as she told me to, and I made my way back to the farmhouse. The rest of that night was a flurry of anxiety and fear as we wondered if the creature would show its face again, but it did not return. In fact, several weeks went by, during which the creature didn't show itself at all, and with each passing night, I felt more and more certain that I had actually managed to scare the beast off for good, or at least until my dying day. Winter dragged on. It continued to be a brutal one, and we wound up losing a few more animals during those harsh weeks, but none of them to the creature with the cloven hooves. It remained absent all the way until the final stretch of winter, during a week when the promise of spring began to thaw the world and melt away the snow. By then, I was sure that I had seen the last of that horrible creature for the rest of my life. But I could not have been more wrong. I awoke early one morning and got started with my chores. It was after dawn, with the sun already creeping its way up the edge of the sky, when I heard my mother's blood-curdling scream. I rushed back into the farmhouse as quickly as my legs could take me. Upon arriving, I found Ma kneeling over my brother's bed, her face a mess of bitter tears. I approached the bed and found that it was empty, my brother nowhere to be seen. He had been replaced by a smear of blood, which had stained his blanket and his sheets and his pillow. I looked at the floor beside his bed, where I saw 2 hoof prints pressed in crimson ink. Asterisk. Such a horrible end to befall such an unfortunate child, stranger. The boy had committed no sin other than having an overzealous sister, who in turn had only done what she thought was best for her family. I suppose this tragic tale can serve as a warning to all of us, though. If you're going to take matters into your own hands, do ensure that you see those matters through. Because nothing can ever be quite as deadly as a loose end left untied.